The other day, I was scrolling through Facebook when I noticed a friend had invited me to like a page called BevarPalads, or Protect the Palads Cinema. At first, I wasn't really surprised that this group has existed. For almost as long as I've been living in Denmark, the Palads Cinema has been threatened by demolition. This iconic building, located only a stone's toss away from Tivoli, has been both lauded and hated for its bright, colorful facade. What did surprise me a bit was when I saw the proposal for its replacement by Bjarke Ingels group, partly because Bjarke Ingels has previously called Palads his most favorite building in the world. So in this video, I'm going to unpack the history of Palads, the arguments for its demolition as well as its preservation, and how things can potentially play out now that this proposal has been submitted to the planning authorities. I'm also going to unpack this proposal by Bjarke Ingels group from an architectural perspective. So, let's get started. The current Palads Cinema was built in 1918 on Axeltor. It was renovated and updated a number of times throughout history. In 1989, the building's facade went from a generic white to the bright multicolored facade we know today. It was designed and painted by the artist Poul Gernes. Now, Poul Gernes may not be a household name, but he is an important Danish artist from the 1960s. He was a very influential figure for the experimental art school in Denmark, and at the time of painting the facade, he was also a professor at the Copenhagen Art Academy. In one of my earlier videos, I mentioned the principle of Gesamtkunstwerk. Poul Gernes was a big proponent of Gesamtkunstwerk in his narrative, and he used art as a vessel to inspire change as well as improve people's lives through art. After his death in 1996, his work gained international acclaim, and in 2016, Louisiana, the Danish Art Museum, put together a really nice exhibition of his work. So, in my opinion, we have a good argument for preservation here. The building functions as more than just a cinema. It has been transformed into an art piece by an influential Danish artist. So why does Nordisk Film, the owner of the building since 1926, want to tear it all down and start fresh? Well, the main reason is that the building just doesn't function well enough as a theater anymore. People are looking for more elevated theater experiences when they visit the cinema. But they could just renovate, right? Well, the argument Nordisk Film has against that is that the building is incredibly thick and difficult to renovate with the piping and ventilation solutions that have been added over the years. While they could just sell the building, arguably the location is one of the most desirable aspects for the owners. Palads is located right in central Copenhagen, only a stone's toss away from Vesterport Station, City Hall, and Tivoli. It's the perfect location to tempt residents or tourists with a lazy afternoon to spontaneously go and watch a movie. In 2017, Nordisk Film attempted to put together the first proposal for demolition and building. This was a proposal done by Werk architects and advised by COE. This was a tremendously ambitious proposal. They planned to completely remove traffic access between the Vesterport S-train lanes and Palads and build towers that were 50 to 100 meters high. The reason for planning to build so high was that the building costs were going to be astronomical. They needed to cover the train tracks to increase the building site area, but also needed to do it in a way so that the S-trains could still run as planned. This was going to be an all-in investment. The building complex was planned to be a mix of housing and office spaces and boasted cafes and green roofs. And to be perfectly honest, when I look at this proposal for this project, I have very few critiques of the proposed architecture, if we ignore the fact that we are demolishing the Palads Theater, of course. The different heights are balanced, and the proposal also complements the contemporary architecture of the area, like Axel Towers. You've got a bunch of functions in this proposal that will suit the really wealthy in Copenhagen and cater to tourists. However, the massive height of the proposed high-rises are notable for Copenhagen. Copenhagen is not Tokyo. Copenhagen is, as a whole, a very low city, and despite newer developments in the central area like the SAS Tower or Axel Towers, as a whole, overly tall buildings are discouraged. All this could be potentially why this proposal was ultimately scrapped, and all was quiet on the fate of Palads until now, 2020. Enter Bjarke Ingels group with a sudden new proposal for the planning department. Now, for the people trying to understand how an architect can suddenly change his position so quickly, let's just call a spade. Money is money, and architects can't always be choosers. And even starchitects are usually concerned with paying salaries. Could Bjarke have stuck to his guns and denied to put together a proposal demolishing his so-called favorite building in the world? Sure, yeah. But this is the man who did a photo op with the Brazilian president and doubled down on defending it. Come on, he's not going to say no to some sweet, sweet Danish kroner. In fact, Bjarke's defense was, well, Poul Gernes probably didn't expect Palads to stand forever. Yes, let's go torch a Van Gogh painting, because he probably didn't expect his work to be preserved. But let's move on and look at this proposal. We've got blocks. Now, this is not necessarily a bad piece of architecture. Oh, who am I kidding? It looks like somebody used the extrude tool to make some cubes, stack them, and then push them ever so slightly to the side just a bit. But this project proposal isn't something that would look out of place in Vancouver, or New York City, or in Tokyo, for example. But as I've said before, Copenhagen is none of these cities. This proposal is completely mismatched for the area. It absolutely dominates the view from Tivoli, and the actual cinema is now going to be placed in the basement of this building, while the rest is going to be office buildings. At the south end of the building, there's a neat little amphitheater, which faces a busy road and an Irma. What a great place to put a view. And as you can see in the render, the proposal completely dominates the skyline of Copenhagen too. Now, for some people, they'll look at this and they will say that this is progress, that Copenhagen needs to have taller buildings so we can build bigger and better than before. Architects like Bjarke Ingels are defining what this new Copenhagen can become. It does no good to cling to old buildings like Palads. They just hold us back from developing the area and making tons of money. But here's another way to think about it. Whenever we demolish a building, we should weigh how much that costs us as a society. Palads is still in good condition, even if it can't function well enough as a cinema anymore. Demolishing it is not sustainable, and building a monster of glass, concrete, and steel is also not sustainable. I don't care how many trees are in the render or how many solar panels will be slapped on top of the roof. Choosing to build a massive new building and demolish over renovating is going to create a massive carbon footprint. Furthermore, I see the paint treatment of the facade of Palads as a work of art and an important part of Danish cultural history that ought to be preserved. Now, in defense of Bjarke Ingels, the team of architects working for him that almost certainly put together this proposal, we do not know what the meetings with this client were like or what the client's ambitions for this proposal were. Every architect, at the end of the day, is restricted by what a client wishes to build or not. And even if Bjarke Ingels Group didn't create this proposal, there certainly would have been another group of architects more than happy to take this job. The only thing that is ultimately going to stop Nordisk Film from demolishing this building is if Palads ends up being listed on a historical registry. Which brings me to my closing thoughts. The proposal has been submitted to the Planning Department of Copenhagen. But this is where people actually hold more power than they might expect. The municipality will ultimately weigh the proposal and grant permission to demolish and build. Or they'll send it back to the drawing table to be revised. If people express in large numbers that they wish Palads to be protected, then this can influence things considerably. What do you think of Palads? Do you think it's an ugly relic of the past, or do you think it ought to be protected? What do you think of the Bjarke Ingels proposal? Let me know in the comments below.